Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit duluthnewstribune.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Hello, Northlanders. It's Tuesday, August 29th. I'm Wyatt Buckner through Duluth News Tribune Minute, presented by Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union.
The average MPECU member saves over $785 a year in better rates and lower fees. And with MPECU, every ATM is your ATM. With their free checking program, you get ATM fee reimbursements at any ATM anywhere in the U.S. Check out Minnesota Power Employees Credit Union's services online at mpecu.com or visit their offices in downtown Duluth, Arrowhead Road, or Miller Trunk Highway.
Now here's a look at today's headlines. A man has been found incompetent to stand trial for shooting and critically injuring his brother last month. Robert James Cope, 30, was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation after being arraigned on a number of serious charges, including attempted murder and assault, in the allegedly unprovoked July 8th shooting that left Stephen Allen Cope, 28, with life-threatening injuries. Judge Robert Friday suspended criminal proceedings Monday upon the recommendation of a court-appointed psychologist who determined Cope lacks the capacity to understand the process and to participate in his own defense. Cope, who remains at the St. Louis County Jail on $750,000 bail, did not attend the Zoom hearing. Friday indicated he was informed the defendant was refusing to appear. St. Louis County Prosecutor Chris Flory and defense attorney Todd Deal did not have any objections to the report, nor did either request a second evaluation. A civil commitment process is expected to commence in the near future to direct treatment for Cope. The mental health evaluation is not public, but court records indicate Cope had a history of mental illness and was taking medication at the time of the shooting. He also had a history of assault and making threats of violence, and was participating in the Range Mental Health Court program as a condition of probation. The shooting was reported on the 600 block of 9th Street South in Virginia, where both brothers were living with their parents. As their father called 911, Robert Cope was still on the scene and attempting to hug Stephen Cope, according to a criminal complaint. Virginia police arrived within 1 minute, and Robert complied with their orders to leave the house. The complaint states that Stephen was found unresponsive and bleeding on the floor of an upstairs bedroom. A Ruger 9mm handgun and spent cartridge casing were found in the hallway. The complaint states that Cope also made a spontaneous comment while being transported to jail, quote, "I woke up from a dream and was told to shoot my brother," end quote. The sibling's mother indicated there did not appear to be anything out of the ordinary prior to the shooting, telling investigators she had seen Robert go upstairs and then suddenly heard the shot. Search warrants indicate there were several firearms in the house, and that everyone except Robert had permits to carry. Investigators wrote that the gun used in the shooting belonged to Stephen, and the parents were unsure how Robert got access to it as their firearms are typically locked in safes. Stephen Cope was said to be on a ventilator in the intensive care unit when charges were filed days after the shooting. Authorities have not provided any update on his condition. A reduction in available permits for paddlers entering the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness helped reduce the overall number of visitors in 2022, according to data recently released from the Superior National Forest. Nearly 151,000 people entered the federal wilderness in 2022, down 9% from 166,000 people in 2021, the second summer of the pandemic and the recent peak in total visitors. The drop in visitors coincides with the 13% reduction in available permits for 2022 after the 2020 and 2021 rush to get outdoors. Under those cuts, there were an average of 37.5 fewer groups allowed into the million-acre wilderness each day, with the cuts spread across several popular entry points. The reduction in permits and visitors was intended to help ease what some visitors complained felt like overcrowding, even before the pandemic rush, and what the Forest Service said was too much pressure for the resource, including some people leaving trash behind, cutting live trees, and otherwise acting badly. Forest Service officials said the decline was likely caused by other factors, such as changing travel and vacation patterns, the economy, weather, and even insects, adding that the number of visitors was down in other federal destinations nationally. Canoeists also were allowed into Canada's Quetico Provincial Park for all of the summer 2022 season, the first time since summer 2019, which likely alleviated some pressure on the BWCAW. Now Dan Williamson joins us with a special guest.
Thanks, Wyatt. I'm joined by one of our colleagues, the great Jay Gabler, Duluth News Tribune arts and entertainment reporter. And Jay is working on a story that we'll be able to see in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune. It's also a story we can find online prior at duluthnewstribune.com. And Jay, the Duluth Children's Museum has a new boss.
That's right. Drew Jensen is the newly hired executive director of the Duluth Children's Museum in Lincoln Park. It's been in its current facility on West Superior Street for a couple of years, and Drew Jensen just took the job this summer. So I was able to go down and visit with Drew and learn about his vision for this Duluth institution for families.
If you can tell us a little bit about that vision, I imagine that was one of your takeaways from the story.
Yeah, totally. I had actually never been to the Duluth Children's Museum at this location. When I was a kid in Duluth back in the 80s, I used to visit the Duluth Children's Museum when it was located in the depot. I'm sure some of our listeners remember those days. There was a 2-story tree you could climb up. It was very exciting. So I was glad to be able to return and check out the Duluth Children's Museum in its new location, which is also really cool. They've got a plane now, at least a model Cirrus plane, along with several other active play areas for kids. And yeah, I got to learn about Drew, his background. He'd worked at the Children's Museum before, as well as doing all sorts of other jobs around creating kids and family programming at other local institutions. And his big job now for the next few years at the museum is to help the museum realize its vision of expanding to a second story of this building that it now owns in Lincoln Park. They want to create more exhibit space upstairs, put in an elevator for accessibility, ultimately have a green roof with a garden and activities outside on the roof that kids will be able to participate in. And they want to have a 2-story climbing apparatus where kids can scamper up and down from the first to the second floors by themselves.
This sounds exciting. I hope it's for kids of all ages, say, kids like in their 40s.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I always tell people when they're visiting Duluth, don't forget that we have a children's museum. I think people think, oh, we're coming to town, or even we're in town with kids and, we'll go down to Canal Park, maybe ride the train. Oh, that's right, there's a zoo. And I think a lot of people don't realize that actually Duluth has a children's museum. And one thing that I didn't realize is how old that children's museum is. I thought the zoo was old, 1923. Well, that's a little older than the children's museum, but the Duluth Children's Museum was actually founded in 1930. There are only a few children's museums in the entire United States that are older than the one we have here in Duluth. It's moved around several times, so I think people may not realize that it is that old because they might just know it in one or two of those various locations it's been in. But it's fascinating to learn that it has such a long, rich history. And get this, Drew Jensen, the newly hired executive director, is only the 5th executive director in the 93-year history of this museum. That means each of his 4 predecessors have served an average of 23 years. So if Drew Jensen stays in the job for even a third that long, it means he will, in fact, be in that position when the museum celebrates its centennial 7 years from now.
Wow, that's amazing. Talk about longevity. For our audience out there, what do you hope they take away from this story?
I hope they learn a little bit more about the Children's Museum as an organization and are reminded that it is available to families, whether they're visiting or local, especially popular in the winter months and on rainy days. But they're open on sunny days as well. You can find more information at the link from my article at duluthnewstribune.com.
Thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dan.
And again, you can find Jay's article in Wednesday's print edition of the Duluth News Tribune. And again, you can find it online prior at duluthnewstribune.com. Wyatt, back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Now here's a look at your forecast, brought to you by Superior Telegram's history podcast, Archive Dive.
Duluth weather forecast for today, sunny to partly cloudy with high temperature in the upper 60s to around 70. Tonight, mostly clear as temps drop down likely into the 40s. Tomorrow will be a little bit warmer with temperatures reaching into the 70s. The weather does look dry the next few days and warmer as we head toward warming conditions for the upcoming Labor Day weekend. I'm Storm Tracker meteorologist John Wheeler.
Thank you to Archive Dive for their support. The monthly history podcast, hosted by Superior Telegram reporter Maria Lockwood, dips into the archives of historic events, people, and places around Superior and Douglas County. Available at superiortelegram.com or wherever you also get this podcast. This month's episode is part 1 of a 2-part series looking back at the life of the legendary Bud Grant. Reporting for today's episode was done by Tom Olson, John Myers, and Jay Gabler. Thank you for listening to Duluth News Tribune Minute. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.